Hi, welcome to this week's edition of Blue Talk. We're getting John, Dave, and myself. We're going to look back over Leinster's victory against Serbia last weekend, Ireland's victory against Italy. Of course, look forward to the Six Nations and Leinster's game against Glasgow next Monday. So, lads, we've a lot to get through tonight. So, quickly rushing through Leinster's victory against Serbia, 63-8. 9 tries, 9 conversions by Harry, and pretty decent performance all around.
Yeah, indeed. Harry was damn impressive, wasn't he? In open play as well as off the tee, but like a guy who can. Somebody said it's a Pro 14 record, 9 conversions.
It is, yeah.
Like, hey, the guy's only a newt. And he's kicking Pro 14 records. That's if Raj did that 10 years ago, they would have been, you wouldn't have heard the end of it. So to see a young lad do it, I think it's incredible. There was a lot of good performances. In fairness, Zebre weren't up to a huge amount, but it was. You still have to, it's still 15 guys, even though they may not be as well organised by our friend Mick Bradley. But, it's still 15 guys you have to put away, which they did, and fair play to them. You always say it, Dave, you can't win when you're playing.
You can't win, yeah. And I agree. But, okay, it's one game down, it's 5 points in the bag, lots of people got a run out of it. But does anyone not think that training today was harder than that match?
Yeah, definitely.
I've long been a defender of Italian teams in the Pro 14. But, apart from the 5 points, there was absolutely nothing of value in that game.
Well, there was a couple of things, Dave. Like, we saw a couple of young fellas showing that they're well able to perform at that level. So Tommy O'Brien come in on the wing, he looked good. So Dan Sheehan, he looked good. He's got a lot of hype over the last year or so, and he's kind of lived up to his hype. When we see Ronan Kelleher a year, this time last year we were watching him score try nearly every weekend. Your man comes on and scores 2. And the other thing was we saw Dan Levy make a comeback and get through. He got through 30 minutes. I can't remember if I read it or heard it, but he said that he felt no pain subsequently after the game, which was great to hear. That it's not like Stephen Ferris coming back and came back, played great, and then unfortunately the flare up of the injury again. So he seems to be getting through it. So, which is great. Yeah, look, I couldn't agree more with you. Like, Zebre aren't up to it, and especially in this time of the year when, a big chunk of their players are drafted into the Italian squad. They just don't have the resources that we do to bring through, let's call them their seconds or even their thirds, just aren't up to the standard required.
No, sadly not. Yeah, I think Dan Sheehan's biggest problem is going to be being overhyped. Like, he's won Leinster Cap now, and he's
I'm not going to select him on the lines just yet.
Well, he's torn it up. He's got a man of the match, but his throwing in looked well. His darts.
I like the trajectory, I have to say.
Yeah, tall guy. It's a bit. He's like the opposite of Devin Toner. He's or maybe similar to Devin Toner. He's an advantage in the line out and a liability theoretically in the scrum. Being taller than your props isn't amazing for a hooker, but he seems to have. I remember looking at him in a game a couple of years ago, and he was getting kind of destroyed in the scrum, but he seemed to hit a point there last year where it all clicked for him. And his scrummaging seems to be like, to have a guy 110 kilos, 6'3", running about the place who can score tries, handle, take people out like you wouldn't believe. Like, that's a huge asset. I know we look at a lot of our hookers, Sean Cronin, for example, playing a frustrated centre, I think we call him. You know, who can score tries for fun as well, and is really fast. Shane, I don't think is a slouch either in the speed stakes, but he's just massive. He's huge legs on him. He's got a lot of some small front row, some small cubic front row are going to get underneath him at some stage and cause him trouble. But outside of that, like it's an advantage in the line out, like you've said. He's higher up throwing the ball in, so you know the extra few inches of height there helps your trajectory, as you've said, Dave. He's what's the only downside I can see is either he gets injured or he gets overhyped.
I'd wait until the hype train pulls out of Station Zebre and pulls into Station Interpro. Because that's where the real test will be. Even if you're playing a team, that's an Interpro is a heightened level of competition. Maybe not in terms of rugby, but in terms of the competition itself. So we'll wait and see. I mean, it's a very good start. I mean, there's no denying that, and he was excellent. I mean, he can't beat a team he's not playing. In fairness to him, he can't play well against a team he's not playing. All he can do is play well against the team he is playing, and he did that in spades.
Yeah. Oh, sure. Watch this space.
I was very impressed, actually, I have to say, with Jimmy O'Brien, a fullback.
Yeah.
I thought he had a great game. I thought the way he came into the line, I thought his kicking game was particularly good.
Yeah, he had some lovely kicks in behind, and with Carney gone and Larmour injured and Hugo Keenan with Ireland, we're crying out for somebody like him, and James Lowe probably not going to be back from Ireland camp anytime soon. It's we've a dearth of back three players, so a guy who can play full back to that stand. Okay, again, we got to have the caveat of it was against Zebre in the RDS, but if he can do that, let's see what he can do in an Interpro or even against Glasgow.
Yeah,
who are a much more serious team.
One other notable returnee was Dave Kearney. Like, he had pulled his hammer or strained it earlier on, or just after we came back at the end of last season. Like, he's still in a very rich vein of form. I think he scored 12 tries in 13 games last season, and he's back on the score sheet again. So, like, I was talking to somebody today, and they were saying, if you didn't know anything about Dave Kearney, right? He didn't have a previous history or Ireland caps, and he had that scoring record. Would he be straight into the Irish squad? With a strike rate of 12 in 13 games, and another try again on his return.
I think, in fairness, I do think he would have been in the Irish squad, the current Irish squad, only for injury. So I think, yes, I do think so. Certainly the previous coach and the current coach seems to have a similar selection policy, relatively similar anyway. So I'd say he would be there. Well, I mean, in fairness to Farrell, I mean, the guys who he's gotten away, I mean, he's picking form guys. Conway is in great form. Conway's been in great form now for 2 years. Keith Earls is coming back, who's also, Keith Earls is an absolute superb winger. And obviously he's got Hugo Keenan, who's been the form guy, and Stockdale had a great game against Italy, which we'll come to. So you kind of have to think that Dave Kearney, he's been unfortunate in that when he was in form and there was no international rugby, and then he got injured when the international rugby came back, and he hasn't been able to just squeeze back in. So maybe for the Eight Nations squad, he'll come in.
We've a lot to get through, so I just want to move on as quick as possible. A couple of other games at the weekend. Ulster beat the Dragons 40 points to 17. That was a pretty impressive performance by Ulster, I thought. Admittedly against Dragons, one of the weaker sides. Connacht, I thought Caelan Blade was magnificent.
That was a cracker, yeah. I really enjoyed that game.
Blade was absolutely world class in that game. He really was.
Yeah. And
Tom Daly, I thought, came when he took over the kicking duties, was excellent as well.
Yeah, he had a good game.
I haven't seen him play 10 before. He's always been 12 anytime he's played for Leinster. So I didn't even know he could play 10, but he didn't let anyone down there, did he?
No, I thought he had a great game.
And a couple of big lads like with Peter Robb there, who can play 12. Him and Robb at 10 and 12. That's some big lads to be defended in the centre.
They have a very chunky midfield if you throw in Bundy into that mix as well.
Jesus, you'd be hiding under the bed with the three of them running at you. But yeah,
and Munster rounding off the clean sweep for Irish teams. Munster beat Cardiff last Monday night. Some nice touches in there. They played quite a youthful team, and I think there was 14 Munster-born players, which is, you know, we flagged them a bit, but it was actually good to see that they're giving trust to some of the younger guys coming through, and kind of paid off. Like, they scored a nice try through the centres. There was a lot of offloading.
That was a beautiful bit of rugby, that was.
Yeah.
That was a fantastic try. That's probably try of the weekend.
Yeah, it was another good game, actually. It was interesting watch. Maybe not quite the excitement of Connacht and Edinburgh, but it was an interesting game. And Monday Night Rugby for the first time. Yeah,
I enjoyed it. It was nice to spend a Monday watching that than having to avoid Coronation Street.
That's still going. Jesus.
Just the other couple of results there. Benetton were beaten by Scarlets, and the Ospreys took that's Thriller, yeah. And the Ospreys took care of Glasgow 23.
That's a great result for Ospreys, but you really have to question what the hell's going on at Glasgow.
You do.
And kind of keep going on for another week, please.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we'll get to that now. We obviously take on Glasgow on Monday night, so it's our first Monday night game. Obviously, a repeat of last season's 2019, the final. Glasgow's form, they've only won one of their 3 games. I think they lost to Ospreys and Connacht, and they beat Scarlets in round 2.
Yeah. I know the last game we've lost in the Pro 14 was Ulster, but I think the week before that we lost to Glasgow. I could be wrong on that.
I think you're right.
But I know we did beat them in the final. But we've historically had a hard enough time with them in the league anyway, over the past maybe 5 years or so. They've never troubled us in Europe, but you know, they've always been, especially going up there. This week we're at home, I think. Are we?
No, away.
We're away on Monday. Okay, so it's not always a happy hunting ground over there for us in Scotstoun. So you'd always have a bit of trepidation, but they're not in great form, and we seem to be going fairly well. So it's been nice to come up against. Okay, they're not top of the world team, but they're a step above Zebre for sure.
I'll tell you what would be interesting, actually, just from a wider perspective, when this season is over and things are hopefully back to normal, to examine the statistics of a supporterless season versus a supporter season. You know, just to see what difference, if any, that supporters and having supporters in the ground make. I mean, some people say it doesn't. I personally believe it. You know, it makes some in a close game. I definitely think it makes a difference.
Sure.
Perhaps it doesn't make such a huge difference if you're playing, like if Leinster are playing Zebre, I don't think it makes that big a difference. But if Leinster are playing Munster or Leinster are playing, Glasgow when they're good, I think it does make a difference. So it'll be interesting to see how the stats come out on that.
Yeah, I mean, I can remember reading Jerry Thornley's articles for years, and I think he always said that there was only one of the 4 quarterfinals on average in the Heineken Cup was won by an away team, and I think that stayed the same this year.
It did, yeah.
I think Saracens were the only away team. Again, of course, we're also good now. Like, you know what I mean? Which I was kind of thinking, would this be a season that home advantage wasn't as clear cut or wasn't such a factor? But clearly it still is, you know.
There's a lot to it. Like, as well as the crowd, you've got the old sleeping in your own bed, living in your famous or in your familiar dressing rooms. You've got all your, everything is to hand. Things are generally set up for the home team, whereas the away team are kind of a little bit strange. Plus, they've got to travel.
I mean, a lot of those Saracens players will be well used to the Aviva Stadium.
Yeah.
They played there a couple of times with Saracens, a couple of times with England. They'd be. Yeah. It wouldn't be foreign territory to them the way that, say, going down to the Marcel Michelin or, some other stadium that they weren't familiar with.
Or even the RDS would have been probably a little bit more.
Yeah.
But like, I suppose, and people are only human, there has to be some little bit of trepidation from the players of jumping on a plane, going through airports, just at this time of the year. Maybe they're young and they don't really care, but there is, I'm sure, some little bit in the back of their mind going, God, do I really want to get on a plane or go through airports or put myself at risk of going out into general circulation when it'd be nice, it'd be easier just to do it all from the comfort of North London, where they're obviously from.
Well, guys who go across a white line onto a professional rugby field are probably unlikely to be too afraid of most things, in fairness.
And of course, with Saracens, they could fly in and out. I mean, literally, you can commute. I mean, people have commuted to London in the past and to Dublin in the past from London, so it's not the most strange of circumstances. But it'll be interesting to see when all this eventually winds down and we're out of this kind of Aldous Huxley dystopian future that we seem to have gotten ourselves into, how this whole thing, what the statisticians make of it, shall we say.
It will be interesting. So anyway, I suppose that leaves the table. You had it up there a few minutes ago. We're obviously 3 from 3. Ulster on 3 from 3 in our conference as well. Like there's actually some strong enough sides in Pool A. We've got Leinster, Ulster, Ospreys, and Glasgow. I mean, all previous finalists certainly of the competition. It would, from just looking at it from the outside in, you might say that Conference A on paper looks far stronger than Conference B. Just going on the history of some of those, like, Ospreys obviously maybe their star is starting to shine again. They're past winners. Seasons ago now. Glasgow have won it in the past. They've been to finals. Ulster been to quite a few finals. Obviously ourselves. Whereas on the other side, Scarlets obviously have won it. They won it once. Connacht won it once. Cardiff haven't really troubled the scores, and it's been a while for Munster since they won it.
What's interesting about Conference B is that two teams that you would have expected to be challenging the top of the table aren't at all in Scarlets and Edinburgh. They've had very poor starts to the season.
Yeah, absolutely. When you see Cardiff second in the table, they must be getting a nosebleed.
I mean, with the prediction, with the exception of how, I mean, in recent form, with the exception of Ospreys, Conference A is going pretty much how you'd expect it to go, and you'd still expect Ospreys to be one of the top 4 sides. But Conference B, I mean, Scarlets and Edinburgh were teams that, if you put a fiver on it, on either of them to win the whole thing, it wouldn't exactly be money wasted.
Yeah.
But it's looking that way now.
Well, it's still early days, but like Edinburgh's record of 0 from 3 is not great, is it?
It's not, no.
Ian Madigan put a screw in their head in the semi-final. I mean, that's 4 games on the bounce now in the Pro 14 that they've lost. And didn't they lose a Challenge Cup game as well?
They did.
So yeah, they're in the jacks form-wise, and Scarlets are not much better for a team that were in great form until their coach went to Wales.
I mean, Scarlet's only win is that win at the weekend in that thrill fest against Benetton. So you've got 2 teams going pretty poorly.
Yeah.
It's early days, as you say, Jason. It is early days, and it'll be interesting to see how that unwinds as teams get international players back, start folding them in. To see, because both those teams are huge contributors to their national teams.
True. And just going back to our pool again, from an Ulster's point of view, like they obviously got to the final, they were beaten, they were in sort of, they had a bad run of results with the exception of that semi-final last minute kick, but it could have gone the other way in the latter part of last season. And then, but they've come out all guns. They were beaten in the final, obviously, were by far the second best team that day. But they've come back out all guns. They haven't folded like Edinburgh have. They've kind of obviously regrouped and said, McFarlane's obviously done something right with them because he's managed to get them 3 from 3 at the start of the season.
Ulster will always be there thereabouts, because whatever about the single digits, they always produce lots of young backs. Always produce them, loads of them. They have them coming out of their ears, and you can see that as well. Like James Hume looks to have really stepped on this season, for example. Michael Lowry playing it out half was an interesting one. They always produce, and wingers as well. I mean, you have to remember, if you think about it, they've got a fair few guys injured as well. Like Balakoon is out injured, and he was a big player for them last year. So Ulster will always be there or thereabouts. Until they start producing forwards, I don't think they're gonna, get over the hump. But they'll always have a chance.
Yeah, they even export backs like the Ian Whitten or Chris Farrell or what's his name, Sammy Arnold. Like they're churning them out for other teams as well as their own. But for every 3 of them, there's one Paddy McAllister.
Yeah.
True. So today was the draw for the Heineken Cup. Obviously, because of COVID, they've had to change the format of it. We managed to be paired with Saints and Montpellier. We knew that it was going to be these 2 from 4. So I think we might have got the easier of the draw. Ulster were in the hunt in the same pool or options that they could have chosen as us, and they got Gloucester and Toulouse. So I'm actually, far happier getting Montpellier and Saints than those 2 other sides, particularly Toulouse.
If you want to beat them, you want to beat them. Yeah,
well, I tell you, I'd rather not have to play them.
No, that's what I'm saying. You'd rather avoid them. I'm much happier with. I'm much happier with Montpellier than Toulouse. Saints and Gloucester is a bit of a coin toss, really, but
probably. It's just that we have Saints' number though, Dave.
we have a screw in their head anyway. Even if we didn't have the number, which we do, we do have a screw in their head, because they've had some fairly hefty beatings from us over the last couple of years.
Yeah.
Particularly last season.
Yeah.
No, I think we put 90 odd points on them in those, or maybe it's not 90, but 80 points on them was it? Yeah.
Yeah, I think you are.
Yeah. So it was kind of an unusual, the way that they've done it is obviously it's not groups. So I'm not sure. I know it's obviously going to be the winner comes out, but I still can't get my head. I still can't figure out how they're going to decide. Is it the number of games that teams win?
Top 4 teams on points each will come through.
Montpellier aren't going to play the same sides as we do.
No.
Top 4 in each conference go into semi-finals,
quarterfinals,
and then they play home and away. So you're only playing 2 teams in the pool stage, as far as I understand it.
Yeah.
So it's a very short pool stage and a longer knockout stage is the plan.
Coming away quarterfinals, yeah.
Interesting, just to see how it goes. It's out of 2 games, there's only a possible 10 points, so there could be a bit of a squeeze for the last few places. It's going to be goal difference. There's going to be points difference in there somewhere, making a difference between, because second seeds play third seeds, and first seeds play fourth seeds. So that second v third battle is going to be the kind of interesting one. You'd expect the top, except for Toulouse, you'd expect the top seeds to do a bit of ass kicking, but then seconds and thirds could be more even, and there could be there could be teams complaining that, oh, we only had to play, or they only had to play X and Y, and we had to play A and B. You know, there'll be a bit of that because who you play is going to really determine. You know, if you've got two closely matched teams in 2 and 3 knocking the crap out of each other, and then you've got teams in level 1 knocking the crap out of level 4. So, you know, it's gonna be the squeezed middle who are going to lose out.
Yep. Be interesting though. Those matches are going to take place in December and January. Those pool games, and then quarterfinals. The two-legged quarterfinals going to be in April. So it'll be obviously. I think it's going to be a little bit too soon for any fans to be able to. I was looking at it, going, oh, any trips there to plan, and of course it's going to have to quickly slap the side of my head to say cop on.
You might get a quarterfinal in though.
Hopefully, fingers crossed.
Exactly. Yeah. Who knows?
So anyway, we've covered a lot of the. Actually, we haven't, because I wanted to talk about Glasgow. Boys, what do you think would be our selection for Glasgow?
I'd say more of the same.
Yeah, same again.
We're
Maybe
good.
start Dan Levy.
Maybe, yeah. There'll be a bit of minimal rotation. There might be a couple of guys back because it's a Monday night. There might be a couple of guys back for the bench from Ireland. Will it not?
No, I wouldn't say so. I'd say anybody who's in the international squad won't be coming back because they want to keep them bubbled.
Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah, never considered that, of course.
One thing I do think is that they'd be eager to get, because obviously the Six Nations ends at the weekend and another competition's about to start, so they might want to put some yards into Dan Levy,
possibly,
for that new competition, and then you might see a change to the whole kind of thing. But it's going to be very interesting. The selection would be much the same, and it'll be actually good because I'd be really excited now to see how Sheehan goes against a better team like Glasgow.
I'm looking forward to seeing another game of Harry Byrne and giving him more games. Like I thought, again, he was, you know, we just kind of see him, he's in for a game, and then normally Ross Byrne slots back in, but because Ross is going to be presumably, or obviously we know, is benching for Ireland, Harry's going to be getting the second game on the trot. So I'm looking forward to seeing him just solidifying because he's been very, very impressive whenever he's given the opportunity.
Yeah,
sorry, Dave. If you consider that players always say that a run of games is what makes them, especially when they're younger, a run in a consistent team, you know, sky's the limit for Harry Byrne. Ross will be coming back, giving out to him. What are you doing? I can see the two of them scrapping it out at some point in their career.
I think they're going to be putting toothpaste and shaving foam in his runners and stuff like that, you know.
I think Mammy Byrne's going to have to step in.
Yeah, definitely. So anyway, lads, we'll turn our attention to the Six Nations. Last weekend, we took on Italy. We put 50 points on them. Scored, what was it? 6 tries, was it?
Yeah.
5 tries.
6.
5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 7 tries, I think.
7 tries.
Sorry.
Yeah, 50 points.
Hugo Keenan made a fairly impressive debut, scoring 2. Should really have had a hat trick.
Yeah.
Very unlucky not to.
What do you think? Did you think that was interference, or are we being a bit biased?
Whatever about the body block when he stuck out his leg. That was it. That's once the TMO saw that was the end of it, because that's an unnatural movement kind of thing. So Once he whatever about shifting your weight and kind of getting away with that excuse, he kind of shifted his leg out in a way to kind of block him, and that was the end of that.
Mm.
And the ironic thing is, he didn't need to.
Well,
Yeah.
I suppose that leads me on to Stockdale. I mean, like, he kind of mixed the good and the bad. He obviously set up that obviously non-try, but he ran a beautiful line for it. Really cut through that defense. Okay, to probably put a caveat on it that it is Italy, but then he didn't do the fundamentals, and we were, I think we're going to really be looking back and comparing everyone to Rob Kearney. We saw what we were doing with Jordan Larmour when he wasn't fielding high balls as comfortably as Kearney did. Likewise, Stockdale he certainly knocked on one, if not two, that you would just expect a guy playing international rugby to field.
One in particular that was a bad miss. But that was his first game of international rugby at fullback, so there is that. He has a prodigious boot which he used well. I always feel sorry for fullbacks because their missed tackles look worse, because their tackles are always last ditch one-on-one tackles. So that I'd say he'd probably be unhappy with his tackle for the first Italian try himself. So whatever, but his running was absolutely dynamic, and he kicked really, really well. So if he adds that other stuff, then he's certainly a long-term option.
Nobody has been so unhappy with their tackle since Donald Trump.
Anyway. I think he did enough to get selected against France anyway.
Yeah, he's a bit of a conundrum. I mean, if you think back to the early '90s and the great days of the Gervin Dempsey v Jordan Murphy, Jordan Murphy missed the odd tackle, in fairness to him, and Gervin Dempsey was Mr. Positioning, whereas Jordan Murphy was a great attacking fullback. You've got Stockdale, who, as you've said, has a massive boot on him. He can easily get it from 22 to 22. It's a left boot too, which is interesting in the back line, depending on what direction you're going. But he's pretty scintillating going forwards. He's great at the chip kick. He's got a lot of tools in his armory in attack, but maybe positionally and defensively, and as you've highlighted the high ball thing, I don't know. I'm a little bit reminded of George North sometimes, because he was awful under the high ball. Still is, as far as I can see. He's made a career out of being shit under the high ball for such a big guy. And I think Stockdale, while he's probably not as heavy as George North, is certainly as tall.
I wonder, and I make this point on behalf of my many relatives who are ardent Gaels. Unlike a lot of guys who've been playing fullback in Irish rugby, I wonder, not playing Gaelic football, would that be a factor? Is that just been?
I know where you're going. It's a cliche, though.
It is. It is a cliche, but I always found, like, guys. I mean, I played a certain amount of basketball when I was younger. I played Gaelic football when I was younger, and half of the thing about going fielding a ball is the knowledge that you're going to do it. The confidence that you're going to get up, you're going to get it, and you're going to get back down again. I mean, it is very much a confidence thing, and it only builds up through repetition and practice. I mean, guys like Teddy McCarthy were small guys. They didn't start catching the ball out of. I mean, it wasn't something that was inherent in them. It was something that they practiced, and he has less practice in that art than perhaps other guys in Ireland. Not his fault, nothing to do with that, and I'm not making any kind of other point other than he'd be a less experienced fielder than other guys. But I'm not saying I'd still pick him on Saturday, like, because another game under his belt is another 5 balls he has to catch.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see how he gets on, and how it all, when James Lowe qualifies. Like, technically, he would have been the incumbent in the 11 jersey, and that's where James Lowe likes to appear. However, they can both play full back. and he's been getting a spin. I'd say probably with RFU influence, he's been getting a spin there for Ulster over the last year.
He said it's his preferred position, John. Stockdale has said it's his preferred position as fullback.
Interesting. Well, he want to get out on the field and do all that high ball practice till he falls over. I think the thing about Gaelic football is more the catching over the head thing, which is just not a thing in rugby.
Well, if you in one of the games, I think it might have been against Saracens, or maybe it was the final against Ulster. Hugo Keenan caught a ball like that over, like he looked very Gaelic football. He actually caught it nearly behind his head. And I was just sort of, I was actually, as you were talking about it, I was thinking that, and if you think like Larmour, wouldn't have played much Gaelic football in his youth either. So you just like we're a country that probably our other sports have suffered because of the influence of Gaelic football, because so many people play it and don't as a result play rugby or soccer, because they're playing Gaelic games. And we've an opportunity to pick a fella who plays Gaelic football at fullback and use those skills, and yet Leinster and Ireland to a point have played Larmour at fullback and now Stockdale at fullback, who wouldn't have ever played Gaelic football growing up. I just think it's a little bit ironic, Yeah,
it's an interesting one, but as I say, I mean, with high fielding, it's all about confidence. It really is. It's all about the confidence of going up there, getting the ball, and then getting back to ground. If you believe you're going to do it, you will do it, or at least you won't care if you don't, because you believe you're going to do it the next time. It's very much a confidence issue. And
I agree with you, Dave, that like we're looking at that Italian game and we're saying, well, I'd rather make mistakes in that game.
Oh yeah.
And iron them out before, because Italy will come strong at you, but they just don't have the firepower to take advantage of every error you make. Whereas we saw France against Wales, like they're a bloody good side. So lads, I want to stick with the Italian game. So like just looking at, I thought Porter, I thought it was his best game in green. I thought he was everywhere, especially in the loose. He was putting tackles in. He was certainly making lots of turnovers and very prominent, carrying the ball as well. And it was encouraging to see Murray as well. We didn't kick the leather off the ball. He only kicked it twice, and he seemed to play with a little bit more vision rather than just aimlessly kicking the ball up in the air.
There was a reason for that, though. We were trying to run up the points against Italy. It was possession rugby rather than kicking hope. It may be different at the weekend. Who knows?
So we have to do the same, John.
Well, we'll see. We'll know what
we this game could finish 2019 and we win the championship.
Yes, that's the famous one, all right. As long as those 20 are 4 unconverted tries. It's kind of set up for us in a way, in that we know what we've got to do before we go out, but that can be a burden as well as an advantage. And especially if England go out and run up a proper score, which they're not that far behind us.
Will the abandonment of the Barbarians fixture, cancellation, will that affect them, I wonder? Because they won't have had a run out.
They didn't. And they've got a few injuries as well. Jack Nowell's out, Luke Cowan-Dickey, Courtney Laws, obviously Manu's gone. And then there's concern over Joe Marler and Elliot Daly and George Ford. Obviously, and Owen Farrell, hasn't played rugby for 5 weeks. So, they're going to be a little bit rusty.
Fingers crossed.
They're still, okay, I fully expect them to get a bonus point win against Italy. But
let's hope it's 2019 for them.
Yeah, exactly.
You just never know with the Italians, though, especially in Rome. They just could come out and play like men possessed. And I'm not saying they're going to win the game, but You know, they've never beaten England in the Six Nations, as far as I know. They're the only
only
team.
team
The only team they haven't beaten.
Yeah, so you just never know. That little carrot there might be, it could be their All Blacks, you know. You just never know. But the rabble that played against, well, rabble is a bit strong, but the team that played against us is not going to put a dent in England at all. But
No.
you never know. You
They
just
barely
never
put a
know.
halt in their gallop.
Yeah.
But I mean,
Yeah,
in
we-
fairness, I mean, to a certain extent, again, there's Italy these days. It's one of those games that you can't win. You know, but I thought, I liked a lot of our play. I liked a lot of our performances. I think that, you know, it's not necessarily a negative having Bundy Aki and Robbie Henshaw on the centre together. Two guys who've played together very successfully for Connacht. As you say, Keenan played well. I thought Stockdale played well. Andrew Conway's has been in great form now for 2 years. We were talking about Porter. You were talking about Porter earlier. One thing that has to be said is the scrum held up very, very well against Italy. Now, France would be a different matter. But, you know, just looking at them in terms of, you know, from a technical point of view, the body shape was good. Positioning, feet, hips, shoulders was good. So,
But isn't it nice to be in a position where we have it in our own hands? Bonus point wins in Paris are few and far between in the last 50 years. But at least we know that even if England win 278-0, we can still 2019 will still win it for, you know, still win the championship for us. So, you know, that's a great thing to have in the locker, and it's setting it up for a good day of rugby, like Wales and Scotland for the aperitif. You know, Wales will most likely, they're at home. I know they're not in good form at all, but they'll probably put Scotland out of the thing altogether. So it's between us, France, and England then.
Well, John, Scots are actually ahead of Wales as in the table as it stands.
I know that.
And that match is actually going to be in Clonethley in Parky Scarlets, because I think we mentioned before, Millennium Stadium has been used as a field hospital.
To go back to John's culinary metaphor, it's Scotland and Wales would be a lovely starter. We have England and Italy as a palate cleanser, and then Ireland and France as the main course.
Yeah.
And where better to get a feed than in Paris?
What pub are you going to, lads, to watch it?
That
television just over there.
Yeah.
I was talking to some of the guys. I was talking to some of the guys in our local Jay in the Carpenter. They're working obviously in the off license now because the pub is closed, and they were saying like this should be the biggest time of the year for them, because, you know, Six Nations in the autumn, it should be just mental. And of course,
it's not.
Well,
it's a different kind of mental.
We did unfortunately suffer a bad injury to Guy Ringrose. He broke his jaw. He's out for 5 to 6 weeks, I guess. You know, like he's kind of. I thought he played well. He was playing scrum half for part of that game, and I was thinking to myself, I was smiling to myself, thinking,
I was laughing.
He made more passes in those 10 minutes than he did in his career to date with Ireland. What did you think of the back row? Like, I thought the balance looked good.
I thought the balance was excellent.
Yeah, and I mean, like, obviously Connors, he got a try. He made umpteen tackles and he got man of the match. Like, what a great debut for him.
He has this uncanny ability. I think it's a combination of balance and engine, that he seems to be able to make a tackle and just swing around the tackle player and be practically on his feet as part of the same movement and ready to make another tackle. He's now he can also go for 80 minutes as he proved. So it's an amazing combination he has. He's everywhere, you know. And added to that, you were talking about Porter earlier. Porter was just destroying people in the loose. He's like a limpet over the ball as well. Like you could just see him a few times getting near the ball on the ground, and it doesn't matter who has it. he's getting it off them, or if he's not, he's getting a penalty.
Uh,
Man,
he-
ball, a lot.
he seemed very motivated. Like I read a little interview he gave in the 42 prior to the match, and you know he was talking about trying to make a difference to people's lives just for 80 minutes. You know, that have kind of lost people or lost jobs or struggling financially or whatever, and just giving them something, sort of some bit of joy for these next couple of weeks or whatever, you know, just seemed to be a little bit more thought-provoking than what you'd expect from a prop.
Yeah, amen to that.
I think that the back row balance is having Quayle and Doris in there frees up Stander to do what Stander does best. He doesn't have to worry about maybe some of the looser stuff that a number 8 is kind of expected to do these days. With Doris there to do that, he can kind of concentrate on doing what he does best. So the balance of the back row is actually very, very good. Doris reminds me so much of Jamie Heaslip. He really, really does. The way he plays, it's very, very similar. You could see that in the turnover for
Right, wasn't it?
Keenan's
Very
try.
strong. Yeah.
That was Heaslip-esque, that style of play.
Yeah, that's a big compliment too.
It's meant to be.
Oh, I know.
Yeah, I thought that
but as a result, that Stander had probably one of his best games for Ireland in a long time.
yeah, but like I think just kind of a different mentality. I thought, again, just looking at the game itself, we were offloading far more. We were looking for, like, I think Sanders is a perfect example. You know, much to criticism, like he used to just get the ball. He was so one-dimensional when we saw him play for the last 5 years. He'd just pick up the ball and run into somebody. Now he's actually looking to pass and offload. And you could see that within the team, that we're looking for opportunities to get the ball away, to get it out of contact, not taking contact and setting up a ruck, but to try and play the ball out of contact, use our skills and look for people around us, rather than, you know, very prescribed running into contact, going to ground, setting up a ruck, making sure that that you're in at a correct angle so that the ball is placed there in a certain period of time. And, you know, in 74% of the cases, when you're on the left-hand side of the pitch, 15 meters out, you should do X with it. Like, there seems to be more off the cuff.
I think
It's the way the game is. It's the way the game is going, though, Jason. I mean, we discussed this last week. Because you're much more likely to lose a ruck ball. You can't just set up a ruck and expect to get the ball back, because the poacher, the jackler, is so much more.
These days.
Yeah, so I think all teams are going to be offloading just out of necessity, because you know rucks are not rucks the way it was refereed. You know, in the Joe Schmidt era, shall we say. Rucks were a reliable means of getting the ball back to you and setting up a new attack, whereas now they're not. They're a free for all, and if somebody decides to attack your ruck, you're gone. You know, and it doesn't matter what part of the field you're in. So that's probably
the regulatory environment around the breakdown has changed. Maybe not the rules, but the interpretation certainly has. And the days where you can, from your own half, start setting up massive multi-phase sets of play is gone. Now you can still do that once you get into the 5, because once you're in there, the ref's going to favor the attacking team over the defensive team. But up until that point, you can't do that. So you have to keep the ball mobile. And in fairness to Farrell and to Cat, they've realized this, and they seem to have put a new game plan in place to take advantage, or not to take advantage of it, but to take this into account. So, I mean, what I can see is Ireland playing this, you know, more open style of game up until they get into that, you know, 5 meter, 10 meter area from the opposition line, and then going back to the because against France, playing multi-phase rugby is the right way to do it, because they kind of don't have a clue what they're doing after 3 or 4 phases. You know, that's just the way it is. That's French rugby. So, but getting to that point is going to be the tricky part, and that's why they've changed, you know, the modus operandi, as it were.
So obviously the team has been announced for the game against France, and no changes to it with the exception of we've got it there, Dave. Obviously, you just one change to the team. with Henshaw coming in place of Ringrose, and then Chris Farrell subbing up onto the bench. So it's a notable day for Cian Healy. It's his 100th cap. And I think there's only, is it 5 or 6 other Centurions, which is some achievement for him, considering that he was almost set to retire not so long ago, when he couldn't even close his hand. And, you know, he's gone on and won another probably 50 odd caps in that meantime.
You've Rog Dricko, Boldy, Rory Best, John Hayes, and there's one or two more. Yeah, I said Paul O'Connell. Yeah, there's a few people in the 90s like Stringer and Dunners. I think are very up near the 100. But and Malcolm O'Kelly, yeah, didn't quite make it. Heaslip is another one, yeah, of course.
I think Heaslip has 100 caps. He's 5 lines and 95 Ireland. So
that's it. Yeah.
You know, I mean, getting 100 caps for any international player is a hell of an achievement. But for one, he's had the setbacks that Cian has had. I mean, I mean, and it's all hard work. I mean, he got there through hard work. You know, he's had problems. He had problems in terms of, you know, finding the body shape that he was most comfortable with and he was most effective with, and he kind of, you know, came in and lost out on that once or twice. He'd lost his position initially after his injury to Jack McGrath, but he fought his way back. You know, he didn't. Yeah. He could have sat on his caps and sat on his Heineken Cup medals and said, "Well, I've done well in my career. You know, let's just, you know, see it out." But he didn't. He went. He kept going, and obviously now he gets his reward.
Yeah, you fully have to admire that. Particularly, as you said, you think back to 3 seasons ago, McGrath was, you know, on the bench for the Lions and getting into the tests for 15 or 20 minutes at the end, and Cian was sitting at home, and he's come back and fought his way back to, you know, to take back both his Leinster and Ireland position from McGrath. It is a very, very fine achievement. Like we kind of spoke about the makeup of the back row, but I think, like, you know, what we might lose a little bit of grunt and having Byrne in the second row, he certainly puts himself around as a sort of an extra 6 on the
he's a very fine footballer, a danger at the breakdown, good hands and good pace for a lock. You know, sometimes, you know, French packs can be a bit leg heavy. So if you've got guys like Byrne, Doris, Ryan, Stander, who can kind of run meters into them, it can be something that can come to your advantage.
Yeah, but in the scrums, you've got those big cart horses in the second row against you. It's, you know, you can. We're just hoping there's more lineouts than scrums, I think.
They're always, yeah.
Well, obviously, yeah. But what I mean is, there are considerably more.
Who's reffing?
Wayne Barnes was slotted down.
Yeah.
However, he failed a COVID test apparently.
Yeah.
And well, he's still down. They're going to make a decision tomorrow, apparently.
Yeah, because Wayne Barnes can be a bit go with the winning scrum kind of thing.
Yeah, I wouldn't call his judgment into question at all. But other people will. Other people will say, what, you know, he's going to have it to.
The only thing I'd say is it can be hard to change his mind. If, for example, France get on top in the scrum, then no matter what we do, if we change the way we scrummage or even we change the players, it can be hard to change his perception of how the scrum has gone already. Other referees less so, but then other referees don't referee as well generally. So,
well, there's another reason to worry about the scrum. You've got Jason's mate Finlay Balaam on the bench, who if he's as bad as Jason thinks he is, we're toast. We're absolutely toast against the French. I seriously hope and think that he's not, but you know, it'd be much nicer to have Mr. Ted Haig Furlong.
There, lads. So, the women's international. I mean, we were talking last week about France. France coming here to play the women's game because we couldn't go to France, and it looks like now that the game is off because of the COVID situation in France. But anyway, carry on.
Yeah, COVID's gone mad over there. They've been third in the world on about 3 or 4 days for new cases. This like behind just India and US, which is pretty stunning for a nation of 60 million people. You know,
And a really good healthcare system.
Yeah, I don't know what they're at. I don't know why they're having millions of people at their games either, which is crazy.
Maybe there's a correlation, John.
You'd have to think so, but anyway,
Wouldn't you?
I'm not a doctor. I'm not going to weigh in on those matters.
Just going back to the Ireland-France game, indeed, it's going to be interesting to see. I mean, he hasn't announced his team, although we pretty much know what it's going to be. There's not going to be too many changes, or indeed any changes from last week. But he is limited.
Well, we know Teddy Thomas. We know Teddy Thomas is out.
I think that they're talking about what's his name, Bouthier in.
No, Halliburton.
Yeah, sorry. But the thing is, he is limited in how many times he can pick players over the autumn series, whether it's 6 nations or 8 nations, because of the agreement between FFR and Eleanor. Each player can only play 3 games.
Mm-hmm.
But you'd kind of think that this game is the priority of all of the games.
Yeah.
Like, because I think it might have been on Against the Head. They mentioned it's 3.3 million. No, it wasn't. However, it was 3.3 million is the difference between first place and 4th place for prize money.
It's a lot of money.
So if France slide down that table, that's a lot of bread.
Yeah.
Well, as I said earlier, if Wales beat Scotland, that's Ireland, England, France are going to be 1, 2, 3 in some order or other. It'll be unlikely to see France winning it because England are probably going to run up such a score that it'll because France are on the same points as England. It's unlikely, but you know, if they beat us, they're going to definitely come second.
But if they lose to us, John, we're talking about if his hands are tied and he can't pick players, like he's going to pick his strongest side in this game.
For sure.
In order to try and avoid dropping down the table and the FFR receiving 3.3 million less than they potentially.
There's an element for every team this weekend of win this game or the tea ladies get it.
There is a little bit of that. There certainly is.
You know, I mean, the unions are stretched beyond the pins of their collars at this stage. So
you'd wonder how much.
Every euro counts.
I know that's prize money that we're talking about there, but you'd wonder how much they're going to make out of the TV rights for the 8 nations competition, because nobody's got a gate. Nobody, you know, maybe France has, but nobody else is letting people into the game. So it's the only way of generating. You've got the prize money in the 6 nations, but you've nothing, as far as I know, in the autumn series except the TV rights. So.
Well, you might have prize money from World Rugby, and they might decide to spend some of the 100 million or whatever they made out of the World Cup last year.
Maybe.
I'm just
game afloat.
We can but hope.
Yeah. Do we have any questions from our viewer, Dave?
Yes, we did. Literally from our viewer, from Ricardo Tierney, who asks, which, if any, Leinster players currently not in the national squad have in recent weeks played themselves into contention for a call-up from Farrell to the 8 nations? Rhys Ruddock, Harry Byrne, Dan Levy? I'd say certainly Dan Levy.
You've said it earlier, Dave, that they're just getting him warm for 8 nations. Yeah, definitely. I mean, he was pretty much the incumbent when he got injured. It was between him and Josh van der Fleer, and now you've got Will Connors in the mix. I think Will Connors is going to be used in a horses for courses at both Ireland and Leinster level. If you want the kind of game that he gives you, you're going to play him. If you want a different type of game, you could, you know, you've got like Josh van der Fleer is no slouch as a tackler. He's probably a slightly better carrier. he's pretty powerful as well. But Dan Levy, I think if you want the punch, you're going to go for Dan Levy. If you want an abrasive 7.
Yeah.
So it's real. It's getting crowded in there, and that's just the 3 Leinster options. It's always been a position of strength in Irish rugby, the back row, but getting Dan Levy back as an option is definitely going to help. Harry Byrne, I can't see him getting called into. You never know though. With Joey Carberry injured, Jack Carty is probably the other. You've got Madigan and Billy Burns up north. Madigan is having a hard enough time getting into the team. Whether he's injured or whether he's dropped or what it was, but
he walked off the pitch the other night for Ulster. The commentators didn't seem to draw anything to it, and he walked straight down the tunnel.
Right.
And he was substituted after 45 minutes, and I just thought, God, like I didn't know whether he was injured, if he was going on a HIA, or whether he was
just pissed off.
He got the shepherd's hook, and like I don't know. And he went straight down the tunnel, which you don't see very often from a rugby.
Unless a guy is injured, you don't see it.
Yeah.
Maybe he was.
Funny enough, just to bring 2 things together. We were talking about the plethora of 7s available to Ireland and Leinster. Talking about the France Ireland women's game. If you saw the Italy Ireland women's game at the weekend, you would have seen an extraordinary performance at 7 by Claire Malloy.
Yeah.
Cracking.
I watched that game. She was good.
She's absolutely excellent, so she was.
And I think you should also make mention of Lindsay Peat, who nearly 40 years of age was fantastic.
She's a basketball international, soccer international, played for the Jackies and plays for Ireland. I mean, what more?
Incredible.
Unbelievable.
Like, if she was male, they'd be writing plays about her.
If she was male, Brian O'Driscoll would be cleaning her boots.
Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, it's kind of like that's unprecedented. Like, I know it's a different generation, but Kevin Moore, and obviously from the football team and playing for the Dubs, and it was kind of nearly unheralded that there was somebody who was able to excel at 2 codes.
Yeah,
and she's excelled at 4 codes. Like, that's amazing, absolutely amazing.
Yeah, there was no stopping her for a try.
No, which one?
The one where she took the ball in the short line.
I know. Yeah, did she not get 2 though?
Oh, she did. Yeah. You're right. No, I was talking about the first one because I remember saying to Miriam,
Right.
No one was stopping her there. No, but I thought Claire Malloy had an extraordinary game.
Yeah, and that's a shame that the ladies' game has been called off, because it was a very generous gesture that the French Rugby Union.
Yes, they deserve great deal of praise for that. It was a very sporting gesture.
Yeah, so it's a pity that happened. And just going back to that question from Ricard, like the one other player that we kind of touched on him earlier was Dave Kearney. Like, I just think that I think he will be drafted into that
Squad.
8 Nation squad.
We have not suddenly, but there's actually a really good, strong cadre of back 3 players now for Ireland. Okay, some of them are injured, but you've got Keith Earls, you've got Andrew Conway, you've got Keenan, Larmour, Lowe, you've got Stockdale, Balakoon, and Addison. The back 3 riches are very well stocked.
Yeah. Long way at last. It was probably under Joe Schmidt. It was probably the weakest area for a lot of his tenure.
Yeah, if he didn't have his first choice guys, he didn't have a whole lot of else, kind of thing.
No, but we persisted. Like, I have to say, like this time last year, in the World Cup, we were just saying, why isn't Conway playing? Like, we just couldn't figure it out that he wasn't getting any game time. And like they played him, maybe in sort of one, like what you might consider to be a lesser game, if you're considering the Japanese game as a lesser game, but like
we lost.
Like, he was in of course, and then he was in a suit for the All Blacks game. And he was
and he
form.
has been the form wing in Ireland for the last, as I said, year, 18 months.
Yeah.
What I like about him, he seems to have picked it up maybe from Keith Earls, and I mean this in a good way, but he has a bit of spite about him.
Definitely, yeah.
I mean that in a positive way, but he has that kind of little bit of, whiff of cordite, to quote Jerry Thornley.
Yeah. Like we spoke earlier of fellas coming back, like Cian Healy, coming back from an adversary or from a very difficult situation. The night before Leinster played Toulon in that quarter final, I think in 2014, I went out to watch the Leinster A against Munster A. He was on the bench of the B&I Cup semi-final team.
That's right, yeah.
Leinster. While the next day, the team that he had left were playing in the European Cup quarter final. And, I'm sure he must have thought, what have I done? My career kind of, especially from a guy that had, such a glittering schoolboy career, it was all supposed to be laid out in front of him. And it didn't work, wasn't working out the way it was supposed to. And then, sort of, I'm not saying you're at your lowest playing for Munster A or been on the bench for Munster A, but it certainly wasn't going to plan. And he's kind of turned it around, and he's 6 years later, he's starting on the wing for Ireland, and you've kind of to admire somebody's tenacity to keep going, because it's very easy to say, do you know what, there's easier things in life than this.
Yeah, no, I agree entirely. I mean, he's a player. He's a player that always worries me when we play Munster. I mean, there's things about Munster that don't worry me, but Andrew Conway always does, because he has that. I mean, obviously he's a great finisher. He's got good pace. He's got great hands, and he has that kind of spite, determination, niggle, call it what you will, to not allow someone get on top of him. He's a guy that he's a player that always, he's one of the players that when we play Munster, he's one of the players I worry about the most.
Yeah, well, hopefully he'll have a good game at the weekend.
Yeah.
Anyway, boys, as ever, thanks a million. Thanks very much for watching. If you are following us on Facebook or Twitter, please subscribe, give us a thumbs up. Anyway,
Jason, if they're watching this, they don't have any friends.
That's very true. Anyway, boys, as ever, thanks again, and enjoy the games at the weekend. Cheers.